we were going to talk about Mildred Thompson, another very, very influential person in our lives. This is a Mildred Thompson piece here, a lithograph that was done at Rolling Stone Press in Atlanta. This is her Quaver series, and there's a suite of 5, so we have all 5 of them. This is one of 5. So, talking about Mildred, it's funny how we met in a way. Missy and I had been collecting African American art, had just got started good, and had met Bob Blackburn in New York City, and were getting things from Bob's printmaking workshop. And Bob kept telling us that we should meet his friend Mildred Thompson, who lived in Atlanta, very nearby here. And so I remember I made a blunder. I really procrastinated on calling Mildred. Bob had given me her number, and I had gotten, of course, a lot of books and was reading about African American artists, but I wasn't seeing Mildred in the books. So I didn't think maybe I needed to call her. Just maybe didn't realize I didn't have all the correct books. But I did call her. Actually, Missy and I went up to Agnes Scott College. She had a show there I'd seen in the Atlanta paper. And so we went up the last day of the show on Sunday, and the show had been taken down a day before. So there was nothing to see. I wanted to see some of her work before I called her. So I came home that Sunday and called Mildred, and it was a very short conversation. I told her I was Wes Cochran from LaGrange, Georgia, and she said, "Where in the hell is LaGrange, Georgia?" And so I thought she was about to hang up. And I said, well, I thought I better name drop somebody. So I said, Bob Blackburn gave me your number. And she ended it pretty abruptly and said, well, I'll call you back. And so I thought, wow, that's maybe the end of it. But within a few days, she called back and she said, you come up here and come to my studio. And so Missy and I did go to Mildred's place and met her and her partner Donna Jackson. And little did I know that would start a 15-year relationship until she died in 2003. And we must have spent 5 or 6 hours at Mildred's that day and looked at art and all of her art, and we talked and told her we were print collectors, and so she pretty much decided for us what we needed to get. And we actually, at that time, we bought a series of 5 prints that she did called the Mystery Series. And we set up a payment plan, and I was to pay something once a month. And she told me later that the grapevine in the art world is not very long, and it didn't take her but just a phone call or 2 to find out who we were, is the reason she called us back. And so we started on this payment plan, but that didn't last very long because she was always a little cash flow problem. So we went ahead and paid off the remaining balance for those 5 pieces. And then we kept going back to her beautiful place there in Grant Park in Atlanta, and we kept buying art. We sort of became an art patron of Mildred, and at one time I sent her, I think I sent her like $300 a month for 2 years to help her pay on her studio rent. And in the meantime, we got art in return. So lucky for us, we have about 50 Mildred Thompson pieces in the collection. Some sculpture, but mainly prints. And and a pastel, I think we have, of Mildred. So it was so much fun to go to Mildred and go out into the city, and she was a thrift store queen, and she knew where all the stores were, and we had such great times together, her cooking or us going out to eat, and meeting a lot of her friends. Mildred and Donna had a salon at their house, so anyone that came to Atlanta would usually come to Mildred's house, and Mildred always invited us, and we met many artists and curators and art writers and people in the art world through Mildred. So Mildred really became a mentor for Missy and me for those last 15 years of her life. And we were very close. And Mildred was a printmaker, she did painting, she did sculpture, she did photography, she was a writer for Art Papers, the art magazine in Atlanta. And she came and did an article on Missy and me one time for Art Papers, and anytime I needed something written, a speech or whatever, Mildred would write it for me. And so a lot of times I would get invited to come and talk about the African American art that we had traveling around to different museums, and I would always try to deflect and see if I could get them to invite Mildred instead of me, because there would be an honorarium and she could make some money. And she was a beautiful, eloquent speaker, and so I did get to hear her talk about our collection on several occasions. So Mildred, well, she was called the Force. She was very serious and committed to her craft, and she was not casual. This is Quaver #1. There are 5 that we can show, and this was done at Rolling Stone Press with Mildred's good friend, the very highly trained printmaker Wayne Klein, that had a shop there in Atlanta. And Mildred and Wayne became very good friends, and Mildred did a lot of work at his printmaking workshop. And Mildred never really talked to me about her art that much. I know she was, during all of this time that we knew Mildred, she was always, her art was about the cosmos and particles colliding, and string theories and black holes and electromagnetic fields. She told me once, Mildred said she was trying to capture the sound of a star on a canvas. Mildred was reading all about quantum physics, and she would send me books to read too about quantum physics. And so it was interesting. You know, if you take the math out of physics, it becomes philosophy, and I think Mildred was searching for that too. So I think this piece is all about that. Particles and colliding, things that are going on in space. Sometimes Mildred's been talked about as trying to make the invisible visible with her art. And so these are the beginning years of when Mildred was talking about the cosmos. This was in 1989 when this piece was done. And we probably got this series at about that time, 1989. So she's beginning to do this in all different kinds of medium. Mildred could do printmaking, pastels, drawings, paintings, and watercolors. And she told me whenever she had an idea in her head to do a series, she could go to all these different mediums because she was so talented in all of those that if it didn't work in watercolor, she could try pastel. If it didn't work for her in pastel, she could go to drawing. Or if that didn't work, she could go to painting. And then if that didn't work, she could do prints. So Mildred had spent so many years in Germany, I think 15 years teaching and working in Germany. She spoke fluent German. And so I think she was working in this for, she had abandoned the figure many years ago, and she was doing abstract work for most of her career. And so this is, I think, a very good example of her working with the cosmos, the Quaver series, she calls it. This is Quaver number 2 of the series of 5 lithographs that Mildred did. And Mildred, most of the time in her prints, she only did black and white. She was not interested in doing color when she did prints. Mildred had learned a lot about printmaking, I think, in Germany, and so when she came to the print shop, she was pretty prepared, and I think she was always pushing the boundaries and experimenting and trying to go as far as she could go with lithography. So this is Quaver number 2. This is Quaver number 3. So you can see they change a little bit, but so she's working through what's in her mind, and like I say, by the time she did 5 of these, that she knew that it was ending for her. So, but yeah. Like I say, I could never get weary of looking at Mildred's work. We met her and thought she was so fantastic and talented, and loved the idea of supporting her as much as we could. I wish I could have done more, because she was living on the edge. I used to tell her that if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. But I think that's where Mildred lived, was on the edge. And that's where a lot of creativity is, I think. She had a very tough go of it. Working as an adjunct professor in the different colleges there in Atlanta, but never could. Yeah, she just had a difficult time getting along with the administration, and I think she was always a threat, because when she was teaching somewhere, they never had enough chairs to get into her classroom. She was a very, very talented teacher, and all the students there wanted to take her class. Okay, this is Quaver number 4, and you can see it has all the elements of the other 3 that we've looked at, and it's different. And so, like I say, Mildred didn't talk to me about her art or process very much. It was, we've done this and we're moving on to the next one, you know, is the way she felt about it. She was not gonna, I never heard her talk about her paintings very much, or the printmaking, but it is interesting to see how layered things are in this piece, how they keep going back. I just think they're fabulous. Like I say, it was always interesting to be with her and how she interacted with other people. A lot of times it was confrontational. She did not mind confrontation and loved to. She could do that in public if she wanted to. But she was, for me, she was the most fiercely independent and uncompromising lady I had ever met. Okay, this is Quaver number 5. So we've seen all 5 of the Quaver series, done in 1989. So they really look fantastic when you hang them on the wall and put them all 5 together. They really jump off the wall. A lot of, it looks to me like a lot of emotion going on in there. A lot of marks on the page. Lithography is not easy. It's very labor intensive, and a lot of artists, I don't think, like doing lithography, but Mildred was very capable of doing etching, lithography, woodcut, silk screen. We have examples of all of those different mediums of Mildred's. Yes. On the next film we do of Mildred, we will show other mediums that Mildred worked in. We also have some examples of vitrograph, which is actually printmaking done on glass that she did at Harvey Littleton's press in North Carolina. But for being a print collector, it just doesn't get any better than this right here.